Welcome to the Catholic Sobriety Podcast, the go-to resource for women seeking to have a deeper understanding of the role alcohol plays in their lives. Women who are looking to drink less or not at all for any reason. I am your host, Christie Walker. I'm a wife, mom, and a joy-filled Catholic, and I am the Catholic Sobriety Coach, and I am so glad you're here. Hello, everyone. Today's episode is a bonus episode, and what makes this a bonus episode is it is an interview that my friend Steve O'Connor from Catholics Fight Porn did with me many, many months ago. In this episode, he interviewed me about my addiction to alcohol, my experiences with treatment and AA meetings, my recovery, and a bit of my reversion back to the Catholic faith. Now, if you're saying, Christie, I already heard your recovery journey on one of your episodes, you are correct. My very first episode is a version of my recovery story, but Steve, being the great listener that he is, which makes him a wonderful coach, he was able to pull out some different details and other things that much of it I had actually forgotten about or hadn't thought about in years and years. So I'm sharing this in the hopes that someone else out there who is listening will hear it and maybe resonate with parts of my story or how I was feeling, and just know that there is hope for you. So this is what we call in AA as sharing our experience, strength, and hope with others. Steve actually coaches newly married men who are addicted to porn, and he is excellent. So if you know of anyone who could benefit from his coaching, I highly recommend and encourage you to reach out and contact Steve and, maybe share his podcast with them. So I hope that without further ado, you enjoy this episode, and a big thank you again to Steve O'Connor.
All right, welcome again, Steve O'Connor here with Catholics Fight Porn. And in our next episode, I'm very excited to interview Christie Walker, who is the Catholic Recovery Coach, and she focuses on eliminating alcohol. So whether you want to stop drinking or cut down on your drinking, Christie is the expert for that. So very happy to have you on the show, Christie. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Okay, well, so am I. And, I focus on sex addiction. You focus on alcohol addiction or decreasing consumption of alcohol. Mm-hmm. But there is a lot of carryover with addiction in general, with recovery in general. So I thought it would be great to have you on to share a little bit about what you do and how you help others. And I think there's always great power in hearing someone's story, just sort of what it used to be like, and then, how it got out of control, and then how you found recovery and what you're doing to help others. So if you wouldn't mind, share with our listeners a little bit about yourself and your story.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Christie Walker, and I am a joy-filled Catholic. I guess you would consider me a revert, but I am a cradle Catholic who kind of fell away from the church and came back stronger than ever. And I am a wife and a mom. I have twins who are almost 16, and our youngest is 10. And I am a Catholic life coach, like you said, and I help women in recovery or those looking to drink less or not at all for any reason. And a little bit about my story. I am a recovering alcoholic. I celebrated 26 years of sobriety in February. So that was exciting. And so my story with alcohol, I guess I should maybe start there, is that I've never actually been able to drink like a normal person. So the first time that I was exposed to alcohol, it was at a party at an upperclassman's house. It was I did dance team. And so it was one of the captains from the dance team invited us all over. And so my mom thought it was just going to be dance team slumber party thing. But her parents actually had like a guest house or something on their property. And that's where we were. And then like lots of people came. It's a total blur to me, but I can tell you that I took one drink and I didn't stop until I passed out. And I liked that feeling. I felt I was always kind of, the kids always called me like a goody goody. And I like, oh, you do everything right. My friends wouldn't want to talk to me about like mature topics because they were afraid I didn't like really understand that, or I wasn't a good person to talk to it about because I would be judging them, which actually wasn't the case. But yeah, so I liked being able to be included. I liked just the feeling of, being intoxicated. And so I started seeking out opportunities to do that more. And the group that I hung out with, one of my friends, her parents went out of town a ton. And so I would just say, I'm spending the night at my friend's house. My mom was like, awesome. And I would be there and we would have lots of people over and lots of drinking. And we would spot beer. So, I mean, I didn't because I looked like I was 12 when I was a senior in high school, but like my boyfriend and like our other friends that were there would go to the store, try to find somebody that looked, youngish, but of age, and pay them to buy us alcohol. And it worked pretty much every time. It did work every time. And so we would go back to her house and drink. I had another friend who I was able to stay the night at her house, and her parents actually provided alcohol for us. So that was pretty easy peasy. They thought that as long as we drank at their house, we were safe, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Of course, my mom didn't know that, because if she did, she wouldn't have let me go over there and spend the night. So it just kind of progressed from there. I graduated from high school. I went to school. There's a university in my hometown that I went to. I was accepted into, but I wasn't really interested in pursuing anything there. I got a job and I quickly found more people that like to party and did that. Then my mom remarried and she and my stepdad were going to move to the Pacific Northwest where I live now. And I was like, well, I don't want to go. I'm just going to stay here. And she knew that I just wasn't living right. And she's like, I think that you should move with us. And I was like, no. And she's like, I highly recommend that you move with us. And so, as an adult, so I could do whatever I wanted. But I ended up coming to the Pacific Northwest, which was a great decision. And for a while, I didn't party or drink or anything. And I got a job, and then I started meeting people. And of course, it's just so funny how you can just kind of like find those people and gravitate towards those people. The funny thing was when I very first moved out of the house, I moved out with a group of Mormon girls. And so they were very not into drinking. So I think my mom was like, great, that's good. And my stepdad grew up Mormon, but he wasn't when they got married. And so I moved in with them, but I was like constantly out of the house. I just kept finding opportunities to drink and do all this stuff. So I was not living a very good life. I wasn't living a chaste life. I was abusing my body. I was breaking commitments. I was not showing up to work on time. Or if I did, I don't even know what I looked like. I probably looked so disheveled sometimes, and still feeling drunk the next day sometimes because I had been drinking until like I passed out at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, so that wasn't great, but I just kept finding people and living that way. And then finally, my roommates had enough of me. And so they were like, okay, well, we're going to move. I'm moving here and she's moving there. And so now you're on your own. And it just got so bad. Like I would just constantly drink on my own, drinking by myself. Just, I don't even know how, like, I didn't die or how I wasn't, like, something bad didn't happen to me, like terrible didn't happen to me, because I was just living such a dangerous life. Not just from the alcohol I was consuming, which was wreaking havoc on my body, I'm sure, but just the situations I was putting myself in were terrible. And then I ended up moving in with a high school friend of mine, actually the one whose house we would go to and party. I moved in with her and her fiance. And, you know, she had settled down by that time. She was looking forward to marriage and all of that. And so I moved in to kind of help with the rent. But she was just like, I love you, but I can't take this anymore. And so I ended up, I was supposed to move on a certain day. I went out and partied. I came back home to pack up, and she had packed up all my stuff. And she was super, super mad at me. And she was like, I found beer in your closet. There's bottles everywhere. She's like, you should have been here packing up. And I did have like another roommate that I was moving in with, like where I was going. I just hadn't done any of that. And so she was like, and you're going to go tell your mom and your stepdad that you have a drinking problem. And I'm like, no. And she's like, no, you are doing that. Oh, that was terrible. And oh my gosh, I was so mad at her for so many years. If anyone even brought up her name, like my eye would twitch. I was so mad at her. But looking back, she did me like the biggest favor ever. I mean, I can see God working and taking care of me all along the way. But at that time, I just felt so alone and so destitute, and it was just not good. And so I went and I talked to my mom and my stepdad, and obviously they weren't really super surprised, but they were like, okay. And so I was like, well, you know, I'll stop. And I didn't. And then I moved in with my other roommate in another city. And her mom was actually my boss. And, you know, I was living with them and we were partying a little bit. Well, not a little bit, a lot of it and stuff. But she was more responsible because she's actually was a single mom. And so we wouldn't really party at our house, obviously, when her son was home. But when he was with his dad, we would go out. And she got to the point where she's like, you are drinking too much. And even my drinking buddies were like, Christie, you have a problem. And so I will say, if your drinking buddies tell you you have a problem, you probably have like a really, really, really big problem, because usually people who drink with you want to keep you drinking with them. But I feel like that was just the Holy Spirit speaking through them, because they weren't like the greatest people to be around. And then my friend's mom, who was also my boss, my roommate's mom, she was like, Christie, you are like slacking. You're not coming on time. You're, you know, calling in sick and all of these things. And so she was like, you're going to lose your job. She's like, you need to do something. They were both like, you need to do something. So I was like, okay, fine. So I checked myself into outpatient treatment at Kaiser Permanente, and that was not that great. I didn't like it. I was there with a lot of like older people, and they would talk about, you know, I don't know. I just didn't really feel connected to any of them. And I didn't feel like I needed to be there. I didn't have any DUIs. I didn't have a family to lose. I wasn't doing, you know, drinking in front of my kids because I didn't have any. I wasn't married, you know, all of those things. So I just was like, I am not as bad as these people, and I do not belong here, basically. So I was kind of snotty about it. But I stayed there so that I could say like I completed the program, and I did stay sober. I don't know if I stayed sober for 90 days or not, but I would still go out with my friends, and then I would just be like glaring at everybody. So, which is terrible. But so I was like resentful because all I could focus on is what I gave up and what a sacrifice it was and how they didn't understand. And I would just make them miserable and make myself miserable. So obviously that didn't stick, and I ended up going out drinking again. But this time I had more awareness around it because, I mean, that outpatient treatment was not for nothing. Like, it did plant seeds in me, whether I thought it did or not. And so my drinking was messed up. Like, it wasn't as fun as before. It wasn't as carefree. Like, I felt guilty every time, and it's just a mess. So I decided that I was going to get sober. And so I went to the store, and I was like, okay, this is the last day, the last time I'm drinking. And I had tried to quit drinking like many times, or given myself boundaries or perimeters, or I'm not going to do it on the weekday, or I'm not going to do this. But this time I just had this resolve that I'm not going to drink again. And so I bought like a 6-pack of Zima, which I'm sure was what I got, and some cheap beer. And I drank myself into a blackout. And when I woke up the next morning, I was like, okay, I'm done. So I just threw whatever I had away. And I told my mom, and my mom told me that the day that is my sobriety date now was actually the 10-year anniversary of my grandmother's death. And my grandma and I were super, super close. So I just felt her intercession, and I didn't even know it when that was the day. So looking back, I was like so guided and so loved and so protected. And yeah, so I think that's another thing that helped it stick, because I didn't want to mess that up either. Because it wasn't like just for me, it wasn't just for my family, it was for my grandma, and like and her interceding on my behalf, from heaven. And so, or what I think she is. And so yeah, so that kind of started my journey. But my mom had a high school friend who was in recovery as well. And so she had her friend come, and we had lunch. We all had lunch together, and she talked to me about AA, and she talked to me about recovery, and she passed over to me a coin. I had never seen a coin from Alcoholics Anonymous. She passed me this coin, and on it said 9 years. And I was like, 9 years, holy cow. I'm like, this is going to take forever to get to that. I'm like, I don't deserve that. Like, and she was like, no, I want you to keep it. I want you to keep it and hold on to it, because I know that you're going to get there one day. So just keep that as a goal. And once you reach that, you can pass it on to somebody else if you want. I didn't. I still have it. I should pass it on to somebody someday. But it was always this reminder of like, you can do it, like somebody believes in you and all of that. So she ended up taking me to my first AA meeting. Well, she told me I needed to go to AA, and I was like, I don't want to go. I don't know anybody, and everybody's, because I was thinking about the experience that I had had at the outpatient treatment. It just wasn't, I didn't think it was for me. But she's like, no, it'll be so good, and I'll go with you to your first AA meeting, but I can't go with you again. Like, after that, you're going to have to do it on your own. And so, yeah, so that was kind of the beginning of that.
Wow, your story is fascinating, and I feel like I have so many questions. I can relate with just being at friends' houses where it wasn't the best influence, you know. I also drank in high school and partied, and it's where I found porn. Well, actually, like maybe the second time I found porn, but and yeah, carefree, like you said. Um, you're in high school and you're just doing crazy things. And one of the first things that struck me with your story is how you were perceived as such a goody two shoe or someone who followed all the rules. And then, you know, um, alcohol leads you to become an alcoholic. And I'm sure there's a stigma with that phrase. Oh, Christie, she's an alcoholic. Um, I think sexaholic's a little worse, but
Yeah.
so from one addict to another. But I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I think it's so fascinating that you can do all the right things and end up with an addiction. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think, so my parents divorced when I was 5, and my mom was a single mom and she did an amazing job and the best she could. But I ran around with the neighborhood kids and we didn't always do things that were good and right. And so I felt very broken and like I was always wearing a mask, and that I put up this perception of myself and that people didn't really see how broken and how bad I was, because that's how I felt. I mean, I wasn't, but I was in a lot of ways. And so I think that with the drinking, first of all, it kind of numbed those feelings and just made me feel, um, I don't know, like I was part of something and that I was seen. And then part of it was it was probably just the devil working on me. Like, you feel so bad inside. You're such a, you're just like a fraud and a poser, and people think all these things about you that aren't true. So what does it matter if it shows on the outside? And so
Wow.
pretty soon that ugly and that brokenness, instead of just being something I shoved down and tried to um, hide, became who I was.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. Feeling like, well, if people knew the real me, you know,
Mm-hmm,
like, yeah, I'm a fraud. That looks great from the outside, but if they really knew me and how messed up I was, they wouldn't want anything to do with me. But
mm-hmm,
going back to when you were 5 and your parents divorcing, that's a lot of that's a big wound right there. A lot of trauma for a kid to go through. And I know in my world and maybe in yours, it's like that drug of choice. It just fills those wounds, where
mm-hmm,
you mentioned feeling broken and those negative emotions. And once you found something that could, as you said, numb it you didn't feel it, right?
mm-hmm.
You didn't feel it till later. It kind of put
Right.
off puts off those, basically those feelings that we don't want to feel. So,
Mm-hmm,
um, and just interesting, you mentioned that you can now see God's hand in your story, because so fascinating that the friend that you originally partied with that got you into trouble was the one that packed your belongings and said,
mm-hmm,
not only get out of here, but go tell your parents
mm-hmm.
and your mom and your stepfather, but go tell them of your issue. As like, why don't you just kick me out? Why do you have to make me, you know what I mean? Like, why do you have to
Right.
tell me to do the right thing? I don't want to do the right thing. I probably hated that more than being your stuff being packed up. But
Yeah.
was that like that? I can imagine if it was me, just such an inner turmoil. Like, I got to go have this conversation that I do not want any part of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was really tough because I felt betrayed by her. I mean, I was glad I didn't have to pack all my stuff up. I was like, yeah, thanks for doing that. Because I'm a procrastinator and I'm not very organized. So I'm like, that's awesome. But yeah, it was just you're betraying me after all of this. I do want to say though, she and I connected on Facebook like years and years later. And again, every time everybody would bring up her name, I'm like, she's dead to me. Like, don't talk about her. It makes me twitch inside. Like, it's horrible. And then all of a sudden we kind of connected on Facebook and I was just flooded with this grace. And I just apologized profusely and told her, thank you for making me do the hard thing and doing tough love. But what I didn't know is she felt like she had been carrying all this year, this guilt and this baggage of making me do that. And so we were both had so much anxiety around it for different reasons. And so it brought her so much peace when she found out how well I was doing, and that really she was very integral in me. Is that a word? Integral? I don't know.
Yeah, integral.
She was one of the main propellants that got me to move forward with sobriety.
Oh, that's amazing that she also felt just guilty, like she got you into trouble almost. Like if she wasn't throwing parties and encouraging you to drink, that maybe you wouldn't have had this problem. So so fascinating. And then the other friend that you moved in with and working for her mom and all that, I was trying to figure out where your bottom was, because I know in recovery, in addiction, that's so huge. I've heard your bottom explained as, you've hit your bottom when you've stopped digging. You're not making the hole deeper. So what would you say was your bottom?
Right now, alcohol feels like the only way that you can cope with the stress of motherhood, social pressures, and maybe even fit in with your group of friends. But you're starting to realize that it's leaving you feeling ashamed, disconnected, and maybe even out of control. Imagine if you could wake up each morning feeling at peace and proud of the choices that you're making, and free from the pressure to drink, whether that's at home or in social settings. And that, my friend, is where my 5-day Sacred Sobriety Kickstart comes in. By the end of the 5 days, you will feel more peaceful and in control, because you will have more clarity and confidence around your decisions to take it or leave it. You're also going to learn how to manage your mind in a way that is aligned with your faith. You will learn how to speak truth over yourself, and that will help you root out what's keeping you stuck. So check out my 5-day Sacred Sobriety Kickstart and gain the clarity you need to make the decision to take alcohol or leave it from a place of peace. You can visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. I have a pop-up there, or just go to my show notes. I mean, I think the lowest, that's a good question, because I think that there were a couple of bottoms. So the one when I had to go and talk to my parents, and I felt so betrayed by like one of my very, very best friends. That was a bottom for sure. And then I guess being afraid that I was going to lose my place to live and my job, that was a bottom of sorts. And just recognizing the way I was living and realizing that if I didn't do something, I was not going to get better. So my dad struggled with addiction, and so I didn't want to end up like, I didn't want to live the life he lived. Like, he had a very hard childhood, and I've forgiven him, but I had a lot of resentment against him for a long time. And I kind of feel like this was God's grace also, because it helped me understand my dad a little bit more, so that I wasn't so resentful and angry, that he loved his addiction more than he loved me or my family. It helped me, with a lot of that type of thing. So, so I think my bottom, I had a couple different bottoms, but again, I never got a DUI. I never, so I can say all these things like, well, I never did this, and this never happened, and this never happened, but it would have.
Yeah, you had a higher bottom than
I
others,
did.
but you still had a bottom,
Hmm.
multiple. Yeah. And that's interesting too, that just bringing up your father, and father wounds are a big thing. And the fact that he was addicted and you thought he chose the addiction over you when really he was broken and he had
Hmm.
his own set of issues and the way he was raised and the issues
Hmm.
he ran into. And then it gives you more compassion, right? And all
Yeah.
of that is a very healing type of a process to go through.
Yes. Yeah, because I was able to see my dad as the child that he was. Being a mom of boys, I also see my dad in like a totally different way, and the way that I treat my children. um I just sometimes, I mean, this sounds weird, but sometimes I hope that it just like translates to him. Like, I know you didn't always feel this love and and all of this, but I'm pouring it into your grandchildren. And I just hope that that gives you some peace and, you know,
Oh, that's
love. I
awesome.
don't know.
That's great. And then, that last binge before you cleaned up your act, well, it reminds me too, is like, let me just look at a little bit more porn and act out a few more times before I
Yeah.
clean up my act tomorrow. And
Yeah.
also like a diet, like, okay, I'm
Hmm.
gonna start eating clean, but before I do that, let me go get a bunch of ice
Yeah.
cream. Let me go get a couple
Yeah.
bags of chips, and let me just go all out,
Yeah.
because gonna suck after that. But
Yeah.
and then just really, I'm really moved by your mom's friend who was in recovery. I thought it was really fascinating that, it's great she meets with you, offers to go to your first meeting, but then says, I'm only going to go once.
Hmm.
And what was the thought process behind that? Do you know? Or her
I'm not
reasoning?
going anymore. I'm not going to go to another one.
Okay, so
I'm
she
going
was,
to I'm going to satisfy her by going, and then I'm probably not going to go to another one.
or that was for yourself, you're saying.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, yeah, you're thinking, okay, I'll go to one, kind of like the outpatient thing. I'll complete it just to say I
Mhm.
completed it, and then I'm just going to do whatever I want. But I was going to say, for your mom's friend, when she said, I'll take you to one meeting and only one meeting, do you know why she said, I'll only go to one meeting with you?
I don't know why. I mean, I think that she probably wanted to show me, I think she wanted to be there to support me so that I didn't feel like I was alone and it's not as scary as I think that it's going to be. And honestly, at that meeting that I went to, there were so many lovely people. And it wasn't in the town that I lived in. So I didn't end up going there again. But I think my AA experience would have been different had I continued in that group that we went to. It was at a Protestant church in a neighboring town where my mom lived. But then I live in a different area. And so I had to find meetings over here. So I think that she was kind of getting me started. Like, it's not as scary as you think. So I'm going to go and support you, but you have to do it on your own. And, it's very, um, that's what recovery is. Like, nobody can do it for us. Nobody can want it for us. I mean, I wanted my dad not to do drugs anymore. And no matter how much I wanted it, it wasn't going to happen unless he wanted it. And he never felt worthy enough to want it enough to do that. So,
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Is that so? She brings you to your first meeting to as a this great support for you, but then it's almost like turning it over. Like, all right, Christy, you got to do the rest, right? Like,
right.
yeah, in our literature, in essay, we have this great line that says we give up the old notion of being catered to. Like,
Mhm.
the one who needs the help does the calling, or the one who needs the help goes to the meeting and works the
Mhm.
steps. It's not a sponsor doing it for you, or your
Right.
recovery buddy doing it for you. As you said, nobody can do it for, except for ourselves. So,
Right.
um, awesome. So you kind of mentioned your first AA meeting. Were you still nervous going in there?
The one with my mom's friend.
Yeah, were you nervous? It probably was a good feeling to have her with you.
Yeah. She's kind of like a rough and tumble type lady. So I knew that whatever happened, she had my back. And so I wasn't really scared about going in with her. And yeah, so my first AA meeting with her, it was great. Like I said, it was a very soft place to land. Everybody was so kind. They were, many of them were like, I wish that I would have gotten sober when I was your age. And they really were complimentary to the fact that, I was 23 years old and here I was, making this change in my life before I got to the point that many of them had gotten to. So it was an encouragement for sure.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's another good point is that we talked about the high bottom and you hadn't done all these other things and you weren't married and didn't have kids. You're almost like, why am I here?
Right.
But then you realize you're doing it for yourself so that you can set up a good marriage and be the best mother you can be. And you don't have to go through years of agony. But I felt the same way. I can relate where I was about 25 when I got to my first meeting and you go around the room and everybody's sharing these different things they've done. And I also felt like, well, I haven't done a lot of these things. And then it's kind of that key word yet, is like, you haven't done them yet.
Right.
You might stay in your lane in this one, but yeah. So once you kind of realize that it's not what everybody did, it's how similar we all are. So,
yeah.
So what do you appreciate about recovery?
So the first step is admitting that we're powerless over whatever and our lives are unmanageable. So, and I had felt controlled and led by my addiction for so long. But the thing that recovery helped me with was to realize that I'm also very powerful. So I had to admit I was powerless, but in choosing to detach myself from that vice, I, with the help of God, became very powerful over that addiction. And that is something that has kept me sober, I think, for this long, because it makes me so, it just kind of shows me that I have this strength within me to resist things that might tempt me. And I also, when I set my mind to something, can accomplish anything if it's within God's will, right? So with recovery, it has helped me, it helps me in all aspects of my life. It helps me in work. It helps me with marriage. It helps me with my kids. Because my kids can't get away with anything because I know everything and I've done everything. So, so I know, but it helps me in so many aspects of my life. And so even like you were talking about fasting earlier, if I set my mind to like, I'm not going to have sugar or, something, personally, I do intermittent fasting. That's not something that I all of a sudden cold turkey decided to do. It's been a process, but I'm like, if you can give up alcohol, if you can stop smoking cigarettes, which took me longer to let go of than alcohol, because I was like, I already gave up alcohol. I'm not going to give up cigarettes.
Yeah.
That was dumb. But anyway, so, I have given up, I have been able to, change my habits and break away from certain things I know aren't serving me. And so I know that I can do that when I set my mind to it and when I prayerfully set my mind to it. And I ask God in, because one of the things when I did get sober, I asked God to remove my desire to drink. And, they say you can't pray it away or anything like that. But I was still struggling because I was still kind of had that circle of friends around me. And I just asked God, please remove this desire to drink, this desire to want to go out. And Steve, he did it. And I think it's because I had the faith that he could do that. And so I've done that in other things in my life. I've said, like, I can't do this, but you can, so it really, my recovery didn't just help me stop drinking. It helped me lean into God and be able to see him working, really, truly working in my life.
That's awesome. It's like faith in action. That's what I think
For
is,
sure.
yeah, it's like trusting that God can do it. Because, I mean, he's God, he's
Mm-hmm.
all powerful, and he's a God of miracles. So, speaking of the faith, how you kind of mentioned in the beginning you were a revert to the faith. How
Mm-hmm.
did you get back into the faith?
Yeah, so that was a slow roll, but but I just, AA did help me with that because it has a nice foundation and with, Catholic underpinnings, whether people like that or not. And yeah, so it helped me a lot because, the steps, turn my will and my life over to God, make amends. There's very Catholic aspects to the 12 steps. And that's something that I appreciated about it. And I think that just kind of started watering those seeds that had been planted. I had a very good, firm faith foundation, and my maternal grandparents were a wonderful example of faith. And so I think that, thankfully for me, and that's probably what saved me at such a young age. And so all of those little seeds were getting watered and starting to sprout up a little bit. And that just helped me grow. It took me a while to come back to the Catholic faith because I felt very unworthy. I felt like I was too broken. I was too far gone. I did go to church with my mom, like Christmas and Easter and Mother's Day. And then slowly I started going a little more often. I would go on Ash Wednesday and Palm Sunday because those are fun. And so I would just kind of, and then random Sundays. And so it just was like a slow back to the faith. But the thing that solidified, so I had been going to this wonderful Baptist church that a woman that I worked with, who I really, she was kind of like a second mom to me and took care of me. And she kept telling me I needed to kind of, she was like, you need to get back to church and you need to, get into the word and all of that. So I went to her church. And it was lovely. There was lots of singing. It's kind of like if you turn on the Christian music station on your radio, that was church. And there was a pastor there. He was a wonderful Bible teacher. And so I got to learn some things that I didn't know about or never thought about. And so I really liked it. So I thought, and they had a great children's program. I'm like, in Catholics, we got to take our kids into church with us. And they cry and they, like all this stuff. And I'm like, and look at this. They have Sunday school and the kids go here and the parents go here. And it's just so nice. And so I honestly thought that that was going to be the church that I went to. I even considered getting rebaptized because that's how little I understood about my faith. And even though I was raised Catholic and I went to Catholic school for 6 years and all of that. But, God's grace is so good. So one day it was Communion Sunday and I didn't know what that was. So I was like, okay, cool. And I was actually there with one of my friends and they start passing these platters. One of the platters is a silver platter with like legit saltine crackers on it. Like they didn't even pretend to try to make it look like wafers or anything. So passing that through and I'm like, what the heck is this? And then comes another silver tray with like these little tiny plastic cups of, I didn't know. I'm thinking wine. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to have that. And my friend took it and I was like, is it grape juice or wine? And she was like, I think it's grape juice. And so I was like, okay. So like, I have no idea what's going on. But everything within me is like, this is not right. This is weird. This is not, And so I like ate my saltine cracker before I was supposed to, like, because I didn't know what they were doing. I left there and I was like, I can never go back. Like, as much as I love those people, they're so lovely. They love Jesus. They're, faith-filled people. The pastor was great. The music was amazing. All of these things. I couldn't articulate it at the time, but I can say now it just missed the sacredness of the Catholic Mass. And so when I started, and my faith had been so watered down that I didn't even see the Eucharist as the real presence of Jesus. I just thought it was like the symbol, even though that's not what I was taught. It just like had been diluted and watered down so much by so many different voices and by the world, and like that can't be true. That it made it really it didn't seem like that big of a deal to go to another church. And then, but once that happened, it just ignited something within me. Like, I need to find out. And I got to the point where it was like, I either have to be Catholic or I can't be anything at all, because Jesus, he's in the hearts and, works of those people, but he's not present in the way that he is at the Catholic Church, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. And so he was very patient with me and just slowly kept drawing me back. And the fire grew brighter and brighter and stronger and stronger. And I just had an insatiable desire to know as much as possible about his one truly Catholic and Apostolic Church.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's so fascinating that the Eucharist brought you back, the source and summit of our faith, that, it's not just saltine crackers and a shot of grape juice,
Right.
So that's cool. And yeah, it's hard not to read John 6, Bread of Life discourse, and not realize that this is our faith, And what I love about the Bread of Life discourse is, if you go to John 6 verse 66, it says that's when all those people left him. So John 666, mark of the devil, is when everyone left him and couldn't take his teaching. So so that's awesome. So thanks for sharing about your faith and how you got back into it and the role that AA played and all that. And so let's see, just a few more things here. One of my clients said to me one time, he goes, Steve, I don't wish addiction on anyone, but I do wish recovery on everyone. So I'm just curious, do you agree with that? And then if you do, how do you think we could incorporate more recovery into our society?
Yeah, so I think that's a lot about the way I think about reversion. Like, I think that all Catholics need to have a reconversion of heart, and we continually have to have this reversion back to Jesus, back to the faith. And recovery is so much like that, right? We admit that we are powerless without Jesus. But, faith without works is dead. So we have to do the action. I heard somebody in AA say once, if you want a hot dog, you can't sit in the closet and pray for a hot dog. You got to actually open the door and go out and find it like a hot dog stand, and then figure out a way to get the hot dog. And I was like, yeah, that's true. That's really smart. So that was their way of saying faith without works is dead. And so I think with recovery, it's so beautiful, and it like just helps you rely on God and figure out ways. We should all be working those steps every day, admitting we need God, saying our shortcomings, like thinking about what our shortcomings are and doing all those things. And then, of course, we're called to go and make disciples, right? And so that's kind of what that 12th step is. You go and you help those who need to know the message, who need that experience, strength, and hope that we have, and share that with others. And the same thing is with our faith. Like, we can't just keep it to ourselves and hide it under a bushel basket. We have to go and share it, and share it with the world. So I think there's great similarities to recovery and Catholicism, and our faith and everything. And I just, we have to make amends. There's so much goodness there that, again, the church teaches, but the way that the 12 steps articulates it, it's very concise, and I think it would be a great model to follow for anyone.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I would agree. I love that quote, and I like how you put it into the reversion of the faith. And, I think 70% of Catholics don't believe in the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. So that's a big number. If 7 out of 10 Catholics don't even believe that, which is just a basic, principle in our faith. But yeah, the 12 steps are like these great, you have to think they were, guided by the Holy Spirit, the founders. Um, so, so maybe one of my last questions is there a particular saint or saints that you love that inspire you in recovery?
Well, Saint Augustine, he's like the patron saint of addicts, basically, because he was so naughty. He was so bad. And his poor mom just, following him everywhere and praying for him night and day and night, and didn't give up on him. And I feel like that's kind of what my family on earth and in heaven and, all over was kind of doing with me. And I love the quote where he says, "Make me chaste, but not yet." It's kind of like what you were talking about when I had my last, and you were, like, I'll just look at this, I'll just do this, and then I'll tomorrow, And so it just makes him very accessible and very relatable. And I think, like, again, part of the reason that it took me so long to come back to the Catholic Church is that I didn't see it as a hospital for sinners. I saw it as a museum for saints, that quote, but I just reversed it. And so I thought everybody was just perfect. I thought everybody was perfect and I would never be able to fit in there. I would like shine. I'd be like that black sheep that's trying to get into the fold. And instead, as I've studied scripture and read the saints and heard, their lives and their struggles and all of that, I'm like, they're not that much different than me, except they have like this turning point in their life that just where they can just have full reliance on God. I'm not there yet, and I don't really want to go out like some of those saints did. So, I read like how some of them died and I'm like, well, I don't want to be that kind of saint, Lord, not that kind, just like that lives to a ripe old age and goes quietly in her sleep. One of those kind of saints.
Yeah. Saint Joseph, prayers for a happy death.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Sometimes I think that I might need to be martyred because that's the fastest way to heaven, But
yeah.
I also have a low pain tolerance, so not too excited about those prospects. But well, Christie, this was awesome. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to add before I, just jump into where people can find you and everything. But
and I do want to say that I believe that the intercession of the Blessed Mother has really been my guiding stone, because even when I was having difficulty coming to Jesus, I just can feel her lovingly like bringing me to him, and saying, he wants to heal you, he wants to help you. And I was able to, pray for her intercession before I was actually even able to approach Jesus, if that makes sense. So So she's pinnacle.
Yeah, no, Our Lady is, I mean, what a beautiful gift we have. We have
Mm-hmm.
Heavenly Father, this brother in Jesus, this mother in Mary, and Saint Joseph,
Mm-hmm.
as a stepfather, and yeah, the Holy Family.
Mm-hmm.
How blessed are we, So,
Yeah.
so that's great. And congratulations on 26 years of
Thank you.
sobriety. That's so impressive. And obviously, it's only one day at a time by the grace of God.
Well, that does it for this episode of the Catholic Sobriety Podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I would invite you to share it with a friend who might also get value from it as well. And make sure you subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I am the Catholic Sobriety Coach, and if you would like to learn how to work with me or learn more about the coaching that I offer, visit my website, thecatholicsobrietycoach.com. Follow me on Instagram at the Catholic Sobriety Coach. I look forward to speaking to you next time. And remember, I am here for you. I am praying for you. You are not alone.